It was a visibly frail and sick Ronnie Biggs, seen here on his 80th birthday, who'd been freed on compassionate grounds just a few days earlier. A far cry from the gregarious and unrepentant figure whose decades on the run made him a household name. But eventually he'd been forced to return to Britain for medical treatment and the jail term he'd evaded for so long. Ronnie Biggs was part of the gang who robbed the Glasgow to London mail train at Ledburn in Buckinghamshire in August 1963. They made off with £2.5 million, and the train driver, knocked unconscious, never fully recovered. Convicted and sentenced to 30 years, Biggs escaped by scaling the wall of Wandsworth Prison and lowering himself into a waiting van. It was to be another 36 years before he was back behind bars.
Detective Chief Superintendent Jack Slipper was to spend more than 2 decades trying to extradite Biggs back to the UK, but with legal avenues exhausted, the two nemesis were at least able to share a beer in Rio. And before his own death in 2005, even the famous Slipper of the Yard accepted that Biggs had long since gone straight.
I don't think it's important to bring him back now. It was when I went in 74, it was still active. He was still a fairly young man. He still could go out on the streets, no doubt, and be a member of a team. But he's been out now 28 years. And as far as I'm concerned, he's rehabilitated himself.
Despite appearances, though, all was not well. He was doting father to his Brazilian-born son Michael, but Biggs' health was failing, and with the proceeds of the robbery long gone, he couldn't afford specialist medical treatment. And so, 31 years after he'd flown into Rio looking for a new hideout, Ronnie Biggs flew back to London to surrender to police.
I'm John Coles, Detective Chief Superintendent of New Scotland Yard. Pleased to meet you, he said.
Despite continued efforts to secure his freedom, Biggs remained in prison for years, until the decision was taken to release him on compassionate grounds. Unable to walk, unable to speak, and on constant medication, he still released his autobiography 2 years later in what was supposed to be his last public appearance. Yet in March this year, he was on unrepentant form as he attended the funeral of Bruce Reynolds. Those who spoke to Ronnie Biggs over the years discovered that the Great Train Robber was never apologetic about his life. A line from Shakespeare's Measure for Measure was his favourite quote.
They say better men are moulded out of faults, and for the most become much more the better for being a little bad. I think that suits me to a T.